Yesterday, we took a look at the fuel depot lid toss here, and now we also know what caused it. Yes, this is going to be very interesting. You'll see it in the video. June 19th, 2026. We are in the 5th year and on day 117 since the start of the full-scale invasion. Welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we will take a look at the following. There's nothing from the front since hardly anything happened there, but we will take a look at other things. How the attack actually unfolded and what was said on the Russian side after the attack, especially by the bloggers. They're a bit upset. And what we will also look at, of course, are the measures that Russia wants to use against drones here. And we will also take a look at the situation in Crimea, as well as much more. But before we get to that, I'm going to briefly vent about a comment. But of course, I also took the opportunity to show you what a large part of the work I do every day actually involves. If you don't want to see that, feel free to skip ahead to the minute indicated here, but it could be quite interesting because there's more to it than some might think. I really have to show you this because it's interesting for two reasons. First, to prove something, and second, so you can see what part of my daily work actually looks like. I posted a video here, that was the day before yesterday, showing a drone flying over Moscow. That's exactly how I made it clear in the title of the video. One of the 103 comments stood out in particular. Quote, "What detail here shows me this is Moscow? Trust me, bro, or what?" Well, trust me now, bro, because feel free to watch me. Maybe we'll learn something. Take a look at the video and tell me what makes you think this could be Moscow. I'll play it here for you. We're not just seeing one detail here, as was requested. We're seeing incredible clues in just a few seconds. What were you able to spot? Let me list what's interesting. First of all, the drone itself, because that's a Ukrainian drone, model AN-196. Very distinctive. Here's a comparison image that anyone who isn't blind should recognize instantly. What does that tell us? That tells us that this footage is very likely not from Ukraine, because Ukrainian drones usually don't fly over Ukrainian cities. And where do Ukrainian drones fly around? Over Russia, especially medium-range and long-range drones. So this is probably somewhere in Russia. It doesn't have to be Moscow yet. We don't know that. But we can't rule it out either. So what else do we see? A street sign for a crosswalk. In Russia, they definitely have this kind of yellow border, just like here. So that's another indication that it could be somewhere in Russia. But Russia isn't the only country with such signs. There are other countries that have similar versions of them. But at least it's another clue. But what's much more striking is this incredibly large building with 4 battlements at the corners of the tower, and this building on the left with an extremely eye-catching facade. And as a normal person, I would expect that someone with internet access who is also able to write comments might also be able to use Google Images. Just take a screenshot of the video, search for the building, and see what Google says about it. Google then redirects me to this page here. The page shows the same building from a different perspective. So we've already found the building. It's the same one. Now, of course, it's interesting to know what kind of page this actually is. Well, it's a forum for tenants and property owners. And there's a woman complaining about the constant construction noise in the area or in the neighboring apartment. In itself, that's completely uninteresting. What's much more interesting is where this company actually operates. Oh, take a look. In Moscow. Yeah, what a coincidence. Now we just have to find out where the video was recorded, because it seems to have been somewhere in the Moscow area. But where exactly? Oh, that's easy. Let's think about when it was actually recorded. It was the day before yesterday, during the first attack on the refinery, which took quite a hit yesterday. So let's just take a look near the refinery site on Google Maps. Just for context, this is the refinery site right here. We saw the drones. They came from the northeast direction in the other videos. That means we'll just go into this area and take a look at where there's a larger parking lot here. I checked out a few parking lots there, and then I noticed this. Take a look. This building looks really, really interesting. Let's use the little yellow man online, drop in, and behind us, as you've seen, is the parking lot. Here's the building. Oh, look at that. It looks exactly like in the video. And how can we prove that? Maybe it's just the same type of building. Let's move a little bit further to the left. Oh, that's the other building from the video. Where was the whole video recorded? Right about back here in this parking lot. It was recorded from this direction. He panned up once, then saw this part of the building, and then panned over here and saw this. There was a container in front of it, probably because something is being renovated here right now. We can see for ourselves. This is the parking lot I mentioned earlier. And that's how easy it is to geolocate. So please don't get me wrong, okay? The video has been running for several minutes now. But what's the problem I often see in our society? Critical thinking is not wrong. Quite the opposite. It is very important, and that's exactly how it should be. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone spreads false information in this world from time to time, even if it's unknowingly. And I have also, 2 or 3 times in all my time doing this, unknowingly reported something false, which I believe to be true because I trusted the source or because I used a very trustworthy source, who probably also unknowingly posted something wrong once. However, I can correct that in the next situation report because someone was able to prove it to me. But not like that. If you have doubts about the credibility of any medium, then form a counter-hypothesis and kindly prove the opposite. But just coming up with a hypothesis where writing the comment took as long as Googling is really weak and shows our societal problem. So why go to the trouble and make such a claim before you even have any evidence in your hands? The answer is simple. Because it takes no effort. People are lazy. If a message doesn't match your own opinion, no matter how right or wrong it is no longer accepted as the truth. And above all, nothing is done to prove it, because in the end you might be wrong. So, critical thinking is right and important. Prioritizing opinions and emotions over facts isn't right. Now you've seen a glimpse of my daily research work. You might now understand why it sometimes takes up to 4 hours for me to put together the daily report, which is just about 10 minutes long. Because you have to check and verify a lot of things, especially in a world where anyone can comment on and spread whatever they want. Many people just believe it without checking. The most well-known video of yesterday was definitely the fuel tank cap flying through the air. Of course, you wonder which drone triggered this event. The answer is quite simple. It wasn't a drone, because as it has now turned out, it was a Russian air defense missile that tried to intercept a drone and, like many others, missed its target. This time, the missile hit the fuel tank directly instead of a residential building, street, or field. The Russians literally blew up part of their own depot themselves and even caused yesterday's most spectacular hit. But the Russian air defense really didn't put on their best performance yesterday, because the attack took place, as already shown, right in the middle of air-defended Moscow, and even inside the city. Both are marked here on the map for illustration. You can see it again here on a much better map, and the refinery is located right in the middle there. So, in an area where actually no drone should ever be able to fly through. In addition to all the anti-aircraft towers and other measures, there are also mobile anti-aircraft units that were moving around on pickup trucks or on foot, like this one here, trying to shoot down a drone with a man-pads right in the middle of a busy street. The video says so much about the training and helplessness of the soldiers on the ground. That's one of the reasons why Ukraine was able to break through the air defense ring with so many drones almost without trouble. Some parts were poorly covered, others missed their target several times. And finally, there are also soldiers who were probably poorly trained and couldn't handle this situation. After the recent attacks on Russian refineries and fuel facilities, many drivers are rushing to gas stations. More and more videos of long lines are appearing on Russian social media. In some cases, people are lining up for kilometers just to get some gasoline or diesel. At the same time, major suppliers are starting to limit sales again. At some stations, you can only get 20, 40, or 100 liters per vehicle, and that's already a problem. It's rare to even get 20 liters here, if the station is still open at all. The problem isn't just that some gas stations have run out. The problem is people's behavior. As soon as drivers think fuel is running low, they don't just fill up for today. They fill up for tomorrow, for next week, and for the canister in the trunk. As a result, demand increases exactly at the moment when supply is already under pressure. And this exact behavior, which I predicted a day before the attack, is what we're seeing today. That's how lines form, even before the last drop of gasoline is gone. Of course, the Kremlin claims there are no major problems, but the images from the gas stations tell a different story. When people in a top oil-producing country must wait hours for gas, little else needs explaining. Before you think this only happens in Russia, remember the toilet paper crisis here during the pandemic. Of course, there was enough toilet paper, but because of a kind of mass hysteria, people suddenly started buying enormous amounts of toilet paper and then stockpiling and hoarding it. Others saw this and panicked, thinking they wouldn't get any themselves, so they did the same thing. They also bought more than they actually needed, stockpiling and hoarding it. And we're seeing exactly the same kind of behavior right now in Russia, only this time with gasoline. And with the small difference that, in fact, refineries have actually been blown up, not like toilet paper manufacturers here in the country, who of course didn't explode. Another drone attack is currently underway. This one was reported by the Russian side about 5 hours ago, but hardly any hits or explosions have been reported in Moscow today. So I assume that the Russian air defense was able to strengthen its defensive ring, especially in the area around the refinery. After the Moscow attack, many Russian war bloggers are making the same demands. Russia must finally really fight, or fight for real, as if they had only been fighting for fun so far, or only half as hard as they could. They should finally strike harder and stop supposedly showing restraint, just as the Kremlin keeps claiming. It is often claimed that the Russians are not attacking with their full strength, but are going easy for the sake of the Ukrainians. And that's probably supposed to be the reason why 5 years have now passed during the so-called 3-day special operation. And the terrible thing is, many people actually believe that. I'm not just talking about Russia, but here in our country too. People say, yeah, just wait. Now that the Ukrainians have blown up the refineries, now the Russians will really attack at the front and not just capture a few meters a day. And that's not even an exaggeration. The blogger Roman Junman, he's a Russian war blogger, is now also breaking down this myth quite soberly. His point is, there isn't some secret button for the Kremlin that Putin has just refrained from pressing out of magnanimity. Apart from tactical or strategic nuclear weapons, there is no immediate miracle response with which Russia could suddenly turn everything around tomorrow. Even nuclear weapons wouldn't solve it. They'd just destroy Russia. Above all, due to the enormous political consequences, they would further isolate Russia and militarily probably solve even less than many of these commentators might believe. So the real problem lies elsewhere. Fighting properly wouldn't mean pulling a miracle weapon out of the basement. It would mean completely rebuilding the system. Training personnel for longer, meaning the soldiers at the front, replacing personnel at home who are responsible for the soldiers, changing responsibilities themselves, organizing the administration of drone defense differently than before, shortening decision-making processes, no more fooling around, enforcing responsibility. But that's exactly what the Russian system doesn't want. For over 4 years, Russia has been waging this war without really restructuring its administration. For months, there has been talk about structures and improvements in drone defense, but these hardly have any place in a functioning system. Any real reform would affect various positions, areas of power, and responsibilities. And that's exactly why it doesn't happen. That's the sore point in the Russian debate. Many are demanding that Russia finally gets serious, but getting serious would mean changing itself. Not bombing Ukraine even more brutally, but pulling its own army, administration, and industry out of the swamp. And ironically, that's exactly where it fails. The attacks on Moscow, therefore, not only show Ukraine's ability to strike, they also show that Russia does not simply have an unused level of escalation at its disposal. What's missing is not a secret master plan. What's missing is a functioning state that is still capable of reform after 4 years of war. But if everyone is just fighting for their own position and knows that a reform would probably make them redundant, then nothing will happen. You'll see, the Russian response won't go in that direction. The Russian response to this attack will probably be another major assault on Kyiv, which will follow in the coming days. Meanwhile, in occupied Crimea, it's becoming clear how serious the fuel problem has become for Russia. Russian fuel trucks there are apparently no longer just sent out on their own, but are now escorted by mobile counter-drone teams. Meanwhile, more rapid response teams are reportedly being stationed along key logistics routes. That alone says a lot. Every lost truck means less gasoline, less diesel, more delays, and more pressure on the entire supply of the peninsula. According to reports, the lines at gas stations have decreased somewhat in recent days. This could mean that Russia has brought in supplies to Crimea in the short term. But it could also mean that sales are being more strictly controlled and people are now getting less than they actually need. The crucial point is, this is not what a stable supply looks like when fuel trucks have to be escorted and counter-drone teams are stationed along the routes. Then Ukraine hasn't just hit individual depots or vehicles, because then it forces Russia to tie up additional forces, vehicles, and attention for every delivery. And that's exactly the interesting side effect. The most recently attacked crossings at Armyant and Henegis, if I pronounce that correctly, were damaged, but not completely cut off. At Armyant, the Russians built a temporary dirt bypass. Trucks can get through, but there are traffic jams. At the other location, traffic is operating only in a limited capacity. Other routes are being used as alternatives here. Additionally, new causeway crossings are being built. That means Crimea is still not cut off, but crossing at the important access points is no longer running smoothly. Every trip takes longer. Heavy vehicles move slower, convoys back up, and crossings have to be repaired under guard and monitored. So for Russia, this is by no means a total failure, but at least a logistical bottleneck. And with that, I want to thank all subscribers, channel members, and the Al Gore crew. Special thanks go to Lieutenant Colonel Reniki Silatitich Breljumaj Roofer. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next Situation Report.